James Cooper stood at his kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of amber and gold. The coffee in his hands had long gone cold, much like the emptiness that had settled in his chest since that day 6 months ago. The folded flag on the mantel caught the morning light, a constant reminder of the price his family had paid in service to their country. The day began like any other in the small town of Millbrook, where everyone knew everyone, and the local diner still served the same breakfast special his brother Mike used to order every Sunday morning. 2 eggs over easy, crispy hash browns, and coffee black as midnight. James couldn't bring himself to order it anymore. 20 years earlier, they had been just 2 kids playing soldiers in their backyard, using stick rifles and hiding behind their mother's flower bushes. Mike was always the leader, even though he was younger by 18 months. "Cooper boys stick together," he'd say, a phrase that would echo through their years at West Point and later in different units deployed across the world. The message came on a Tuesday. James had been teaching at the local high school, sharing his engineering expertise with eager students when the principal appeared at his classroom door. The look in her eyes told him everything before she spoke a word. Mike's unit had been ambushed during a routine patrol in Kandahar province. He didn't make it. The funeral was a blur of dress uniforms, rifle salutes, and faces twisted with grief. James remembered standing there, accepting condolences from people whose words seemed to fade into white noise. But it was Mike's unit that left him speechless. Each member of the 7th Special Forces group stood before him, sharing stories about his brother that painted a picture of a man who had become more than just a soldier. He had become their backbone, their moral compass, their brother. Captain Rodriguez, Mike's commanding officer, approached James last. "Your brother saved my life twice," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Once in combat, and once when I was in the darkest place a man can be. He never gave up on any of us." The captain handed James a worn notebook, its pages dog-eared and stained with desert sand. "He wanted you to have this if anything ever happened to him." That night, James sat alone in his study, the notebook open before him. Mike's handwriting filled pages with observations about his team, their struggles, their triumphs, and their dreams for when they returned home. The last entry, dated just 3 days before his death, revealed a side of Mike that James had never known existed. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough," Mike had written. "Not just here, but for the guys who make it back. They carry wounds nobody can see, and the system isn't built to heal those. James always said we could change the world if we put our minds to it. Maybe it's time someone tried." The next morning brought an unexpected knock at James's door. Standing on his porch were 5 members of Mike's unit, still in their civilian travel clothes, looking both determined and uncertain. Captain Rodriguez spoke first. "We've been thinking about what Mike always talked about, creating something meaningful for the ones who come home. We've got an idea, but we need your help." As they shared their vision, James felt something stir within him, a sense of purpose he'd lost since Mike's death. Their plan was ambitious, perhaps impossible, but it carried the same spirit of determination that had driven the Cooper boys all their lives. What they didn't know was that their arrival coincided with the town council's controversial decision to sell the abandoned military training facility on the outskirts of Millbrook. The 100-acre property had been sitting unused for years, slowly decaying into a reminder of the town's military heritage. The council wanted to convert it into a commercial development, shopping centers and parking lots to boost the local economy. But Mike's unit saw something different. They saw a chance to create a sanctuary for returning veterans, a place where the invisible wounds of war could begin to heal. The problem was, they had just 30 days to prevent the sale and raise enough money to make their own bid for the property. As James listened to their plan, he remembered the last conversation he had with Mike over video chat. "Sometimes the biggest impact we can make isn't on the battlefield," Mike had said. "It's in how we take care of each other afterward." Now, looking at the determined faces before him, James understood what his brother had meant. The challenge ahead seemed insurmountable. The town council was firmly set on their development plan, local business owners were already investing in the future shopping complex, and most of the community saw the old facility as an eyesore better removed. But as James read through more of Mike's notebook, he discovered something that would change everything. Hidden between the pages was a letter from a high-ranking Pentagon official, dated just weeks before Mike's death. It detailed a classified program Mike had been developing, a comprehensive support system for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. The program had been approved but never implemented due to his death. That evening, as James sat with Mike's unit in his living room, planning their next steps, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your brother saved my life in ways he never knew. We're ready to help. Meet tomorrow, 0600, at the old facility." The message was signed simply Ghost, a nickname that sent chills down James's spine. Mike had mentioned a ghost in his notebook, a former Special Forces operator who had become a successful business owner after leaving the service. Someone who had the resources and connections they desperately needed. As the sun set over Millbrook, James looked again at the folded flag on his mantel. For the first time since Mike's death, he felt his brother's presence not as a source of pain, but as a guiding light towards something greater than himself. The next 30 days would test everything he believed about family, community, and the true meaning of service. Little did James know, the arrival of Mike's unit and the mysterious message were just the beginning. The true challenge would lie in confronting not just the town's resistance, but his own demons that had been silently growing since his brother's death. The journey ahead would require more than just determination, it would demand the kind of courage that Mike had always believed his older brother possessed. As night fell over Millbrook, James made a promise to the memory of his brother. The Cooper boys had always stuck together, and death wouldn't change that. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would see Mike's vision become reality. The war might have taken his brother, but it had also given him a new mission, one that would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others who carried the invisible scars of service. The next morning would bring challenges none of them could anticipate, and force James to question everything he thought he knew about brotherhood, sacrifice, and the true cost of healing. But for now, he had purpose again, and in the quiet of his study, surrounded by his brother's last words and the presence of those who had served alongside him, that was enough. The morning mist clung low to the ground as James arrived at the old military facility. The chain-link fence, rusted and bowing in places, couldn't hide the facility's potential beneath years of neglect. 5 figures emerged from the shadows, Mike's unit, punctual as always. But they weren't alone. A 6th person stepped forward, their stance betraying years of military training. Ghost, they introduced themselves simply, removing dark sunglasses to reveal eyes that had seen too much. Sarah Mitchell had been one of the most successful private military contractors before disappearing from the radar 3 years ago. Now she stood before them, a powerful ally with resources they desperately needed. "Mike saved my life in Kandahar," Sarah explained, her voice carrying the weight of memory. "But more importantly, he saved my soul when I came back. This project, it's not just about honoring him. It's about continuing what he started." The next hours were spent walking the grounds, mapping out their vision. The old barracks could become transitional housing. The medical building, a trauma center specializing in PTSD. The parade ground, a place for community events that would bridge the gap between veterans and civilians. But the biggest challenge wasn't the renovation. It was the town. Mayor Thompson had already lined up investors for the shopping complex. The promise of jobs and economic growth was a powerful motivator for a community still recovering from the recession. They needed something more compelling than just good intentions. That's when Captain Rodriguez revealed their secret weapon. In Mike's final months, he had been working on a partnership with major tech companies to create a veteran training program. The companies were still interested, but they needed a facility. If Millbrook could become that facility, it would bring more jobs and economic growth than any shopping center. The team split into groups, each tackling a different aspect of the mission. James and Sarah focused on the business plan, working through nights to create something that would convince both the town council and potential investors. The rest of the unit, led by Rodriguez, began reaching out to their networks, calling in favors from fellow veterans who had found success in civilian life. But their efforts hit an unexpected obstacle. Anonymous flyers began appearing around town, warning about the dangers of a military compound in their backyard. Some claimed it would bring troubled veterans into their peaceful community. Others suggested darker motives behind the project. The source of the propaganda remained elusive until James recognized the writing style. Charles Bennett, the developer who stood to lose millions if the shopping complex fell through. Bennett had been Mike's high school rival, and old grudges die hard in small towns. The situation escalated when Bennett organized a town hall meeting. The high school auditorium was packed, tensions running high as he presented his case. "Do we want our children growing up next to a facility full of traumatized soldiers?" he asked, his words carefully chosen to stoke fear. James stood to respond, but it was Sarah who took the podium. Her presence commanded attention, her words carried the weight of experience. "I was one of those traumatized soldiers," she began. "I came back from war believing I was broken beyond repair. But one person saw through my walls, Mike Cooper. He showed me that my experiences, even the painful ones, could help others heal." She proceeded to lay out their vision, not just for a veterans facility, but for a community hub that would bring together military and civilian expertise. The tech company's involvement would create hundreds of jobs. The trauma center would serve not just veterans, but anyone dealing with PTSD. The community spaces would host events, farmers markets, and educational programs. But the turning point came from an unexpected source. Eleanor Thompson, the mayor's wife, stood up. With trembling hands, she unfolded a letter. "My son Tommy," she began, her voice breaking, "wrote this before he took his life last year. He was a Marine. He couldn't find his way back home. This facility, it could save other mothers from this pain." The room fell silent. The mayor, who had been Bennett's strongest supporter, looked at his wife with new understanding. The human cost of failing their veterans suddenly became very real. That night, as James drove home, he noticed something peculiar. Houses throughout town had begun displaying blue lights on their porches, a silent show of support for their project. It had started with one home, then spread like a quiet revolution through the neighborhoods. But Bennett wasn't finished. The next morning, James arrived at the facility to find the gates cut open, walls spray-painted with hostile messages. Security cameras caught masked figures, but proving Bennett's involvement would be impossible. The vandalism, however, had an unexpected effect. Local teenagers, led by the high school art club, showed up with paint and brushes, transforming the hateful messages into murals honoring veterans. Sarah's connections proved invaluable as national media picked up the story. A small town's battle over an abandoned military facility became a symbol of larger issues: how communities treat their veterans, the balance between economic growth and social responsibility, the power of grassroots movements against corporate interests. The pressure forced Bennett to show his hand. He offered to buy out their option on the property for twice its value. "Everyone has a price," he said during a private meeting with James. "Name yours." When James refused, Bennett leaned in close. "I knew your brother in high school. He was always chasing impossible dreams. Look where that got him." The words hit their mark, but not as Bennett intended. James remembered something Mike had written in his notebook: "The impossible becomes possible when people care enough to fight for it." Looking at Bennett, James saw not an enemy, but someone who had never understood the true meaning of community. As the 30-day deadline approached, their plan faced its greatest test. The tech companies were wavering, concerned about the controversy. The town council remained divided. They needed something to unite the community, to show what was possible when people worked together. That's when Ghost revealed her final card. Through her connections, she had arranged for a Special Forces demonstration team to conduct a public training exercise at the facility. But this wouldn't be just any demonstration. They would invite local first responders to train alongside them, showing how military expertise could benefit civilian emergency services. The event drew thousands. Families watched in awe as veterans and local heroes worked together, demonstrating rescue techniques, emergency response procedures, and the kind of teamwork that transcends military and civilian divides. Food trucks lined the streets, local bands played, and for the first time, many townspeople saw the facility not as a relic of the past, but as a bridge to the future. As sunset approached, James stood on the facility's water tower, watching the crowds below. Sarah joined him, her usual stoic expression softened by the day's success. "Your brother would be proud," she said quietly. "But this is just the beginning." She was right. The real work, transforming this vision into reality, still lay ahead. But looking at the community gathered below, at the blue lights spreading through town like stars coming out at night, James knew they wouldn't be doing it alone. Mike had always believed in the power of unity, of brotherhood extending beyond military bonds. Now, in ways none of them could have predicted, his belief was proving true. The next phase would test their resolve in ways they couldn't imagine. But for now, as the sun set over Millbrook, something new was rising: hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the greatest battles we fight are not on foreign soil, but in our own backyard, and the greatest victories come not from defeating an enemy, but from transforming them into allies. The autumn chill descended on Millbrook as the renovation of the military facility began in earnest. Steel beams rose against gray skies, but beneath the visible progress, a different kind of storm was brewing. James noticed it first in the eyes of Mike's unit members: haunted looks during quiet moments, hands that trembled when they thought no one was watching. Captain Rodriguez broke down during a site inspection. The sound of a backfiring truck sent him diving for cover, memories of the ambush that took Mike surfacing like sharks in dark water. It took Sarah and James an hour to talk him down from the episode. The incident revealed an uncomfortable truth: those who had come to build a sanctuary for others were fighting their own battles. The local VA hospital reported an unusual spike in veteran admissions. Many were former service members who had come to help with the project, drawn by the promise of purpose but unprepared for how the work would trigger their own trauma. The facility, meant to be a place of healing, was inadvertently opening old wounds. Ghost disappeared for 3 days after a particularly difficult planning session. When she returned, her knuckles were raw and her eyes held a darkness James recognized from his own mirror. "Mike knew," she said quietly one evening. "He knew we were all carrying something. This project, it's forcing us to face it." The construction site became a crucible where past and present collided. Veterans working alongside civilian contractors would suddenly freeze, lost in memories. The sound of helicopters from the nearby regional airport would send ripples of tension through the workforce. Even James found himself struggling, each swing of a hammer echoing like distant gunfire. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a trauma specialist who had volunteered to help design the facility's mental health programs, observed the situation with growing concern. "What we're seeing," she explained to James, "is collective trauma surfacing. But there's also an opportunity here. If we can help these veterans process their experiences during the construction phase, we'll better understand how to help others." Her suggestion led to the creation of impromptu support circles. During lunch breaks, veterans and civilian workers would gather in the shade of half-built walls, sharing stories that had never found voice before. The circles grew organically, drawing in curious townspeople who had come to watch the construction. One story particularly shook the community. A local teenager, working part-time on the landscaping crew, shared how his father, a Vietnam veteran, had died by suicide when he was young. "I never understood him," the boy said. But working here, listening to all of you, I'm finally getting to know who my dad really was. The revelation sparked a movement. Families of veterans began coming forward, sharing their own stories of living with the invisible wounds of war. The project was no longer just about creating a facility, it was becoming a catalyst for community-wide healing. But with heightened awareness came increased scrutiny. Mental health professionals debated the ethics of having traumatized veterans working on a project that constantly triggered their symptoms. Local officials worried about liability issues. Some suggested shutting down construction until proper psychological support systems could be put in place. The turning point came during a crisis that no one saw coming. A severe storm swept through Millbrook, threatening to destroy months of progress. As rain lashed the site and winds howled through the skeletal buildings, James received an urgent call. Tommy Thompson's memorial flag, displayed in the partially completed community center, was at risk. Without hesitation, a group of veterans and civilians formed a human chain, fighting through wind and rain to reach the building. Among them was Charles Bennett, the former opponent of the project, who had been quietly donating building materials through anonymous channels. The next morning, as the storm cleared, they found the flag safe but discovered something else. The storm had unearthed a time capsule buried decades ago when the facility was first built. Inside were letters from soldiers who had trained there, their words eerily echoing the struggles of the present. One letter, dated 1969, spoke of carrying the war home and the writer's fear of never finding peace. The discovery sparked a new dimension to the project. They began collecting stories from veterans of different eras, creating a living history that showed how the impact of war echoed through generations. The media returned, but this time their focus wasn't on controversy. They captured moments of raw humanity, a Vietnam veteran teaching young soldiers about gardening in the facility's new greenhouse, children reading letters from the time capsule at school, former enemies working side by side to build something larger than their differences. James found himself drawn to the facility at night, walking through the construction site when the workers had gone home. In the quiet, he could almost hear Mike's voice in the wind, offering guidance. One night, he found Sarah there too, sitting in the unfinished memorial garden. "I never told anyone this," she said, "but I was supposed to be with Mike's unit that day. I switched assignments at the last minute. The guilt, it's been eating me alive." Her confession opened a floodgate of similar revelations among the team: survivor's guilt, hidden traumas, unspoken fears. Dr. Chen helped them understand that these emotions were part of the healing process. "What you're building here," she said, "isn't just a facility. It's a testament to the human capacity for growth through pain." The project's scope evolved to include family support programs, recognizing that trauma rippled through generations. They created spaces for children to understand their parents' experiences, for spouses to connect with others who shared their challenges, for communities to learn how to embrace rather than fear their wounded warriors. As winter approached, the facility began to take shape, not just physically but spiritually. The walls held more than metal and concrete, they contained the hopes, fears, and healing of everyone who had contributed to their rising. But the greatest challenges still lay ahead, as the team would soon discover that some wounds run deeper than anyone could have imagined, and the path to healing would require more courage than any battlefield they had faced before. The next phase would test not just their resolve, but their understanding of what it truly means to come home from war. The echoes of combat still rang through the halls, but now they were accompanied by something else: the sound of healing, of community, and of hope taking root in wounded soil. The breaking point came on a frigid December morning when James found Captain Rodriguez unconscious in the half-finished memorial garden. Empty bottles surrounded him, and in his hand was Mike's notebook, open to the last entry. The incident shattered the fragile sense of progress they'd built. At the emergency town hall meeting that followed, tensions erupted. Some residents demanded the project be shut down, citing safety concerns. Others defended it fiercely, recognizing that Rodriguez's breakdown was precisely why they needed this facility. The division threatened to tear apart not just the project, but the entire community. Sarah stepped forward with a revelation that silenced the room. She had obtained Mike's classified mission reports, revealing that the ambush that killed him wasn't random. His unit had been protecting a local school that Taliban forces had targeted. In his final moments, Mike had chosen to stay behind, allowing civilian evacuees to escape. The news hit James like a physical blow. For months, he'd carried the weight of not knowing the full truth of his brother's death. Now, understanding Mike's final act of sacrifice, he faced a crucial decision about the project's future. Dr. Chen proposed a controversial solution. Instead of hiding the struggles of veterans involved in the construction, they would document them, creating a real-time case study in trauma recovery. The facility would become not just a place for healing, but a living laboratory for understanding how communities can support their veterans. The proposal sparked fierce debate among mental health professionals. Some argued it was exploitative, others saw it as groundbreaking. The veterans themselves were divided, with many uncomfortable about becoming subjects of study. Ghost revealed her own struggle during a tense meeting. "I've been running from my demons for years," she admitted. "This project forced me to face them." Maybe that's what Mike intended all along, not just to create a safe space, but to force us to confront our wounds. The project entered its darkest phase. Construction slowed as they implemented new safety protocols. Many veterans took leaves of absence to focus on their mental health. The timeline stretched, and funding began to run dry. Bennett, seeing an opportunity, renewed his efforts to take over the property. James found himself at a crossroads. The easy path would be to accept Bennett's latest offer, now 3 times the property's value. The harder path meant completely reimagining the project, potentially risking everything they'd built. During this crisis, an unexpected ally emerged. Eleanor Thompson, still grieving her son, organized a community support network. Families opened their homes to veterans working on the project. Local therapists volunteered their services. The high school began an oral history project, recording veteran stories. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. During the excavation for the facility's foundation, workers discovered an underground bunker from World War II. Inside were hundreds of letters written by soldiers training at the original facility. The letters spoke of fear, homesickness, and the struggle to maintain humanity in the face of war. This discovery sparked an idea. They would incorporate the bunker into the facility's design, creating a space where past and present could dialogue. The letters would become part of a larger narrative about the universal experience of warriors returning home. The project's focus shifted. Instead of trying to hide the struggles of those involved in the construction, they embraced them as part of the healing process. Weekly community dinners began in the partially finished mess hall, where veterans and civilians shared meals and stories. Rodriguez returned after a month in treatment, his presence a testament to both vulnerability and strength. He worked with Dr. Chen to develop protocols for identifying and supporting veterans in crisis. His breakdown, rather than ending the project, had strengthened its foundation. Sarah coordinated with military historians to document the facility's transformation. The story caught the attention of national veteran organizations, leading to new partnerships and funding opportunities. What had begun as a local project was becoming a model for communities across the country. James spent long nights in the bunker, reading the old letters by lamplight. In their yellowed pages, he found echoes of his brother's words. One letter particularly struck him, written by a young soldier in 1944, "The hardest part isn't facing the enemy, it's facing ourselves when we return." The winter dragged on, bringing record snowfall that further delayed construction. But in the enforced slowdown, something remarkable happened. The community, rather than fracturing under pressure, grew stronger. Local businesses offered discounted services to veteran workers. Schools incorporated lessons about military service and mental health into their curricula. Bennett made one final attempt to derail the project, leaking documents that suggested the facility's ground was contaminated. The accusation proved false, but the investigation delayed work for weeks. The setback had an unexpected benefit: it gave them time to refine their vision and strengthen their support systems. As February ended, James stood in the bunker one last time before it would be sealed and preserved. On the wall, he hung Mike's notebook alongside the World War II letters, bridging generations of service and sacrifice. Above them, he placed a simple plaque with words from Mike's final entry: "The greatest battles we face are not fought with weapons, but with the courage to heal." The breaking point had not destroyed them, it had transformed them. He revealed that his own father had been part of Project Renaissance but had died during treatment. The revelation was meant to discredit the program, but it backfired when military records showed his father had actually been one of its greatest success stories, later becoming an advocate for veteran mental health. The discovery prompted Bennett to finally share his true motivation: guilt over rejecting his father's attempts to help him understand the program's importance. In a surprising turn, he offered to fund a research wing dedicated to continuing his father's work, transforming from the project's greatest opponent to one of its strongest supporters. As spring progressed, the facility hosted its first test group of veterans. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The combination of historical wisdom and modern science proved remarkably effective. Veterans who had struggled with traditional treatments began showing significant improvements. The success attracted attention from unexpected quarters. International healing practitioners offered to contribute their knowledge. Indigenous healers shared traditional wisdom about warrior healing. The facility became a melting pot of healing philosophies, all focused on one goal: helping warriors find their way home. James found himself spending more time in the newly completed Memorial Garden, where Mike's influence was most strongly felt. The garden incorporated elements from Project Renaissance's original designs: specific plants known for their healing properties, arrangements that promoted calm and reflection, and spaces designed for both solitude and community. Sarah, working closely with military families, developed a program that helped children understand their parents' journey of healing. The program quickly became a model for other facilities nationwide. "We're not just healing the warriors," she explained, "we're breaking the cycle of trauma that affects generations." The facility's reputation grew, drawing visitors from around the world. Military leaders, healthcare professionals, and community organizers came to study their approach. What they found wasn't just a treatment center, but a living example of how communities could help their warriors heal. Dr. Chen's research team documented everything, creating a comprehensive guide that could be shared with other communities. They called it the Cooper Protocol, honoring both Mike's vision and his grandfather's pioneering work. The protocol emphasized the importance of community involvement in veteran healing, something that had been central to Project Renaissance's original success. As summer approached, the facility prepared for its official opening. The date chosen held special significance: it would have been Mike's birthday. The ceremony would include representatives from every branch of service, but more importantly, it would include hundreds of community members who had contributed to making the project a reality. The night before the opening, James found himself alone in the facility's new museum space, where Project Renaissance's history was displayed alongside modern success stories. In the quiet hours, he could feel the weight of the legacy he now carried: not just his brother's dream, but a family tradition of healing that stretched back generations. The rising sun would bring new challenges and opportunities, but the facility had already achieved something remarkable. It had become more than a place of healing, it had become a beacon of hope, showing how the wounds of war could be transformed into sources of strength and community renewal. The legacy of brotherhood unfolds on a bright September morning as hundreds gather for the facility's first anniversary. The transformed military base, now known as Cooper's Haven, has become more than just a rehabilitation center. It's a testament to the enduring power of one soldier's vision and a community's determination to honor it. The day begins with an unexpected arrival. A convoy of military vehicles approaches the gates, carrying soldiers from Mike's old unit who had been deployed when the project began. Among them is Private Marcus Chen, the rookie Mike had mentored in his final days. Marcus steps forward, carrying a weathered rucksack he says Mike had asked him to protect. Inside the rucksack, they find a collection of letters Mike had written to various people in his life, each dated to be opened on specific occasions. The letter marked for the facility's first anniversary reveals Mike's greater vision. Cooper's Haven was meant to be more than a single location. It was designed to be a prototype, a model that could be replicated across the country. The revelation coincides with a major announcement from the Pentagon. Impressed by the facility's unprecedented success rates, they've approved funding for 5 similar centers across the country. Each will incorporate elements of Project Renaissance and the Cooper Protocol, creating a network of healing spaces for veterans and their families. Sarah, now the facility's executive director, presents the impact statistics that caught the military's attention. Over the past year, Cooper's Haven has helped more than 1,000 veterans, with a success rate nearly double that of traditional treatment programs. More significantly, the suicide rate among veterans in Millbrook and surrounding counties has dropped by 60%. Ghost, who finally reveals her full identity as Major Diana Harper, shares how the facility has evolved beyond its original scope. What started as a rehabilitation center has become a hub for groundbreaking research in trauma recovery. International medical journals are publishing studies based on their innovative treatment approaches, and universities are sending students to learn from their methods. The facility's influence extends beyond veteran care. Local schools have adopted programs developed at Cooper's Haven to help children deal with trauma and stress. Emergency responders train there regularly, learning techniques that help them cope with job-related PTSD. The ripple effects of healing touch every corner of the community. Bennett, once the project's fierce opponent, now chairs the facility's Civilian Advisory Board. His transformation from adversary to advocate becomes a powerful symbol of the center's ability to bridge divides. During the anniversary ceremony, he announces the establishment of the Thomas Bennett Senior Research Fellowship, ensuring that the work his father believed in will continue. Captain Rodriguez, fully recovered and serving as the facility's veteran liaison, introduces a new initiative called Brothers Keeper. The program pairs recovering veterans with local families, creating support networks that extend beyond the facility's walls. It's already being adopted by VA centers nationwide. The day's most moving moment comes when James opens the final letter from Mike's rucksack, one addressed simply to the future. In it, Mike describes a dream he had shortly before his death, where he saw warriors from different eras gathering in a place of peace. The letter ends with a challenge: the war may end for nations, but it lives on in the hearts of those who fought. Our true victory comes not when the fighting stops, but when the healing begins. As evening approaches, an unexpected guest arrives, the President of the United States. After touring the facility and meeting with veterans, the President announces an executive order establishing the National Warrior Healing Initiative, based on the Cooper's Haven model. The order includes funding for research, training, and the establishment of similar facilities across the country. The day concludes with a ceremony in the Memorial Garden, where a time capsule is buried containing stories from the facility's first year. Among the items included is Mike's original notebook, its pages now supplemented with accounts from hundreds of veterans who found healing within these walls. James stands at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd, veterans, families, community members, and dignitaries. He sees the legacy of brotherhood that Mike envisioned, not just between soldiers, but between all those who understand that healing is a journey best taken together. The facility's success has sparked a national conversation about how communities care for their veterans. Cooper's Haven becomes more than a place, it becomes a movement, challenging other towns to look at their own abandoned spaces and imagine what they could become. As night falls, James returns to his brother's grave, carrying the last unopened letter from the rucksack. This one is marked, "For James, when you understand." He reads it by flashlight, tears mixing with smile as Mike's final message becomes clear. The greatest acts of heroism often happen far from any battlefield, in the quiet moments when one person chooses to help another heal. The legacy of brotherhood that began with two boys playing soldier in their backyard has grown into something that touches thousands of lives. Cooper's Haven stands as a beacon of hope, reminder that while war may break us, love, community, and understanding can make us whole again. The story of Cooper's Haven continues to unfold, but its message remains constant. True brotherhood knows no bounds, and healing is a gift that multiplies when shared. The facility becomes not just a monument to one soldier's sacrifice, but a living testament to the power of human connection and the enduring strength of the warrior spirit.